Some people fail because life is hard. Marcus Blackwell failed because life was too easy. Comfort didn't break him. It sedated him. For years, he drifted, smart enough to pass, talented enough to impress, lazy enough to delay. Until one night, staring at his reflection, he felt something worse than pain. Regret in advance. This is the story of a man who chose discomfort on purpose, and trained until he became inevitable. Stay till the end. This story separates dreamers from builders. Before we begin, if you've ever felt too comfortable, if you've ever said, "I'll start tomorrow," and watched years disappear, if you've ever looked in the mirror and seen potential dying slowly, this story will disturb you. This channel doesn't exist for comfort. If this story challenges something in you, subscribe. Because every week, we bring you stories that force you to choose. Stay where you are, or become who you're capable of being. Now, let me tell you about Marcus Blackwell, the man who waged war with himself, and won. Marcus Blackwell grew up comfortable. Not rich. Not poor. Safe. Food on the table. Bills paid. Dreams optional. His childhood was the kind that doesn't make good stories because nothing dramatic ever happened. No trauma to overcome. No poverty to escape. No villain to defeat. Just middle-class predictability stretching out like a flat highway with no curves, no hills, nothing to wake you up. He was smart enough to pass. Teachers said he had potential, that word they use when they see ability without effort. Talented enough to impress. He could pick up skills quickly, learn just enough to look competent, charm his way through presentations and interviews. But he was lazy enough to delay. And that's the combination that destroys more people than poverty ever could. Just enough talent to get by, just enough comfort to never feel urgent. His parents were proud. He had a degree. He had a job. He paid his rent. By every conventional measure, Marcus was doing fine. Fine. That word became his prison. Fine is the enemy of extraordinary. Fine is where dreams go to die slowly, comfortably, without anyone noticing. Fine doesn't hurt enough to force change. And delay became a habit. I'll start that business idea next year. I'll get serious about fitness after this busy season. I'll learn that skill when I have more time. Tomorrow was always the day Marcus would become the person he knew he could be. But tomorrow never came. It just kept pushing itself forward, staying permanently out of reach, like a horizon that moves as you walk toward it. The dangerous thing about comfort is that it feels like success. Marcus had friends who were struggling, broke, desperate, scrambling. He had a steady paycheck. He had weekends. He had Netflix and beer and the ability to sleep in on Saturdays. Compared to them, he was winning. But he wasn't competing against them. He was competing against his own potential. And he was losing badly. Years passed this way. Not bad years. Not good years. Just years. Time moved through his life like water through a sieve, leaving nothing behind but the vague sense that something was slipping away. He'd look at successful people and think, "I could do that." And he was probably right. But could, without did, is just fantasy. Marcus was living in the gap between capability and action, and that gap was getting wider every year. His apartment was comfortable. His routine was comfortable. His relationships were comfortable. Everything was designed to avoid discomfort, to minimize friction, to make life as easy as possible. And easy felt like victory. Until one day, it didn't. Until one day, Marcus realized that easy was the problem, not the solution. But that realization was still years away. For now, he drifted. Comfortable. Safe. Asleep. The most dangerous lie Marcus believed was this: "I'll start tomorrow." Not because it was malicious. Not because anyone told it to him. But because it sounded reasonable. Responsible, even. Tomorrow I'll be more prepared. Tomorrow I'll have more energy. Tomorrow I'll have fewer distractions. Tomorrow always promised to be better than today. So why start today when tomorrow was coming? Tomorrow turned into years. One tomorrow became 100. 100 became 1,000. Each postponement was small, insignificant, easy to justify. Just one more day of comfort. Just one more week before making the change. Just one more month before getting serious. But small delays compound like interest. A day becomes a week becomes a year becomes a decade of unrealized potential. While others struggled, Marcus drifted. He'd see people hustling, grinding, sacrificing weekends and sleep and comfort, and he'd think they were doing too much. He'd judge their intensity as imbalance, their discipline as obsession. He told himself he had a healthier approach, a more sustainable pace. But sustainable toward what? Toward nothing. Toward more of the same. Toward a life that looked fine from the outside but felt empty from the inside. Comfort didn't hurt him, it sedated him. That's the insidious nature of comfort. Pain is honest. Pain tells you something is wrong. Pain forces you to act. But comfort lies. Comfort tells you everything is fine when it's not. Comfort numbs you to the slow decay of your ambition. It's anesthesia for the soul, keeping you unconscious while years slip past. Marcus had everything he needed to start. He had time, everyone has the same 24 hours. He had resources, he wasn't broke, wasn't desperate, had enough cushion to take risks. He had knowledge, the internet had given him access to every skill, every strategy, every blueprint for success. What he didn't have was urgency. And without urgency, nothing else matters. The lie kept whispering. Start tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll feel more ready. Tomorrow you'll be more motivated. Tomorrow will be different. But tomorrow was never different because Marcus was never different. Same habits. Same choices. Same comfortable routine. He was waiting for some external force to change him, not realizing that change only comes from internal decision. His friends started to divide into two groups. Some stayed where they were, and Marcus felt comfortable around them. They validated his choices, made his stagnation feel normal. Others started moving, starting businesses, making changes, taking risks. Marcus felt uncomfortable around them. They reminded him of what he wasn't doing. So slowly, without realizing it, he spent more time with the first group and less with the second. He built an echo chamber of mediocrity around himself and called it friendship. The years accumulated. 25 became 27. 27 became 29. The gap between who he was and who he could be kept widening. And Marcus kept telling himself the same lie. Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. Never today. At 29, Marcus saw himself clearly. Not in a dramatic moment. Not in a crisis. Just in the quiet of an ordinary Tuesday evening, standing in his bathroom after another unremarkable day at a job that didn't challenge him, looking at a face that hadn't changed in years because nothing in his life had changed in years. Not broke. His bank account was fine. He could pay his bills, afford his rent, buy what he wanted within reason. Not hungry. He ate well. Too well, probably. The slight softness around his jaw and midsection testified to a life without physical challenge, without discipline, without denial. Not special. And that was the realization that hit hardest. He wasn't anything. Not successful enough to be proud. Not struggling enough to have an excuse. Just average. Replaceable. Forgettable. The face in the mirror belonged to someone who had potential at 18, promise at 22, and nothing but comfortable mediocrity at 29. He saw a man who'd been treading water for a decade, mistaking staying afloat for swimming somewhere. He saw someone who'd chosen the path of least resistance so many times that resistance had disappeared entirely, and with it, any real growth. That night, he didn't cry. Crying would have been dramatic, cathartic, a release. But what Marcus felt was worse than sadness. It was regret in advance. He could see his future laid out before him with terrible clarity. 30 would come. Then 35. Then 40. Same job, or one like it. Same apartment, or one like it. Same routine, same comfort, same slow fade into irrelevance. He could see himself at 50, looking back at 29, wishing he'd done something, anything, to break the pattern. Regret in advance is a particular kind of torture. It's the ghost of your future self visiting to show you what you're about to waste. Most people only feel regret looking backward, I wish I had done that. But Marcus felt it looking forward, I'm going to wish I had done this. The pain was preemptive. The loss hadn't happened yet, but he could feel it coming like a storm on the horizon. He stood there for 20 minutes. Just looking. Just thinking. The bathroom light was harsh, unflattering, honest. It showed every compromise, every postponed dream, every tomorrow that never came. His reflection wasn't ugly. It was worse. It was unremarkable. It was the face of someone who'd had every opportunity and done nothing with them. Something shifted in that moment. Not hope. Not motivation. Something harder. Something colder. A decision forming in the space where excuses used to live. Marcus didn't know yet what he would do. But he knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't keep doing this. Comfort had been killing him slowly, painlessly. And he'd been letting it happen because it felt safe. He turned off the light and walked to his bedroom. Lay down. Stared at the ceiling. And for the first time in years, Marcus felt something he'd been avoiding. Fear. Not fear of failure. Fear of staying exactly where he was. That fear would either destroy him or rebuild him. The next morning would decide which. Marcus made a choice few people understand. He chose discomfort on purpose. Not because he wanted to. Not because it sounded inspiring. But because comfort had already made its offer, and he'd lived with the results for a decade. Comfort promised ease and delivered emptiness. Now it was time to see what discomfort could do. No alarm snooze. That was the first rule. When the alarm went off at 5 a.m., he got up. No negotiation. No 5 more minutes. No scrolling through his phone half awake in bed. The moment his eyes opened, his feet hit the floor. It was brutal at first. His body rebelled. His mind offered 100 reasons why rest was important, why he should be gentle with himself, why one day wouldn't matter. But Marcus had spent years listening to that voice. He knew where it led. No junk food. He cleaned out his apartment in one night. The snacks, the frozen meals, the delivery apps deleted from his phone. He started cooking. Simple food. Protein, vegetables, rice. Nothing that came in a package with ingredients he couldn't pronounce. Food became fuel, not entertainment. Not reward. Not comfort. This was hard in a different way than the alarm. Food had been one of his few pleasures, and now even that was disciplined, controlled, intentional. No wasted nights. The television stayed off most nights. Netflix account cancelled. He stopped meeting friends for drinks after work. Started going to bed early like an old man, waking up early like a soldier. His social life evaporated, but he realized most of it had been noise anyway. Conversations that didn't matter with people who wouldn't remember them. Hours spent watching other people's lives on screens instead of building his own. He replaced pleasure with process. Not because it felt good, but because it felt necessary. Every morning started with exercise. Not a gentle jog. Hard work. Push-ups until failure. Running until his lungs burned. Cold showers that made him gasp. He was training his body, but more than that, he was training his will. Teaching himself that discomfort was survivable. That he could do hard things. That his feelings about a task didn't determine whether he did it. The first week was hell. His body ached. His brain screamed for the old routine. He'd wake up angry, go through his day irritable, fall into bed exhausted. Nothing felt good. Nothing felt worth it. The only thing that kept him going was the memory of that face in the mirror. The vision of his future self drowning in regret. He was choosing between two types of pain, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Both hurt. But only one built something. The second week was worse. The novelty was gone. This wasn't an experiment anymore. It was his new life. And his new life was hard. Friends noticed his absence. Asked if he was okay. He didn't know how to explain. How do you tell people that you're choosing pain on purpose? That you're dismantling a comfortable life because comfortable was killing you? They wouldn't understand. So he stopped explaining. But somewhere in the third week, something shifted. The alarm at 5 a.m. became easier. Not easy, but possible. His body started adapting. His mind started accepting this new reality. The voice offering excuses grew quieter. Not silent, but manageable. Marcus learned that discipline isn't about feeling motivated. It's about doing what needs to be done whether you feel like it or not. Motivation is a spark. Discipline is the engine that runs when the spark is gone. He wasn't happy. But he was different. And different meant there was hope. The hardest enemy wasn't people. It wasn't circumstances. It wasn't bad luck or unfair systems or lack of opportunity. The hardest enemy was the voice inside Marcus's head that kept suggesting he deserved a break. That one day off wouldn't matter. That he was being too extreme. That voice sounded like him, knew his weaknesses, attacked when he was tired. It was laziness, evolved and articulate. Not the obvious laziness of doing nothing, but the sophisticated laziness that disguises itself as wisdom. You're working too hard. You need balance. This isn't sustainable. What's the point of success if you're miserable? The voice was convincing because it contained a kernel of truth wrapped in a shell of excuse. It was temptation, constant and creative. Old habits have excellent memory. They remember exactly what felt good. They remember the taste of foods he used to eat, the comfort of sleeping in, the ease of saying, tomorrow, instead of, today. Temptation didn't attack once and give up. It attacked every day, sometimes multiple times a day, looking for weakness, waiting for the moment his guard was down. It was old patterns whispering comfort. The brain is an efficiency machine. It likes routines because routines require less energy. Marcus was fighting against his own neural wiring. Every time he chose discipline over comfort, he was forcing his brain to work harder. And his brain resisted. It offered memories of easier times. It magnified present discomfort. It promised that giving up would bring relief. Every day felt like a loss. He'd finish his morning workout feeling accomplished for 10 minutes, then spend the rest of the day feeling tired. He'd stick to his meal plan but watch others enjoy foods that looked delicious. He'd go to bed early while hearing his neighbors laughing, living, seemingly enjoying life more than he was. The scoreboard of daily happiness had him losing badly. But Marcus had learned something in his years of drifting: feelings lie. Just because something feels good doesn't mean it's good for you. Just because something feels wrong doesn't mean it is wrong. Comfort feels good and kills slowly. Discipline feels bad and builds steadily. He stopped trusting his feelings and started trusting his system. Weeks turned to months. The battle didn't get easier, but Marcus got stronger. His capacity to endure discomfort expanded. Things that seemed impossible in week 1 became routine by week 12. The alarm at 5 a.m. stopped feeling like torture and started feeling like an advantage. While others slept, he worked. While others chose comfort, he chose progress. Until one day, something changed. It was a morning like any other. Alarm at 5 a.m. Feet hit the floor. Workout. Cold shower. Healthy breakfast. But this time, he realized he hadn't negotiated with himself. The voice offering excuses had come, but he dismissed it without effort. He'd won the daily battle so many times that he'd won the war. Not permanently, the enemy never surrenders completely. But decisively. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt normal. And normal was the victory. He'd reprogrammed himself. Discipline was no longer something he forced himself to do. It was who he was. The war with self continues for everyone, every day. But Marcus had become a soldier who knew how to fight it. And that made all the difference. Years passed. No applause. No recognition. No viral moment. Just consistency. Day after day. Week after week. Marcus woke up before the sun, did the work, went to bed early. While his former friends were posting their lives on social media, Marcus was building his life in private. While others were chasing likes and followers, Marcus was chasing mastery. The silence was deafening at first. Humans are social creatures. We crave validation, recognition, proof that what we're doing matters. Marcus got none of that. No one was watching his early mornings. No one was applauding his discipline. No one was commenting on his progress because no one knew about his progress. He was invisible by choice, and invisibility feels like failure when you're conditioned to measure success by attention. But the silence taught him something critical. External validation is a trap. When you need applause to keep going, you become a performing monkey. You start doing things because they'll get noticed, not because they'll create results. You optimize for appearance instead of reality. Marcus learned to find satisfaction in the work itself, in the process, in the private knowledge that he was becoming someone different. No applause meant no pressure to perform. He could fail privately, learn privately, grow privately. When no one is watching, you're free to be mediocre during the learning phase. Free to ask stupid questions. Free to try and fail and try again without anyone documenting your failures. The silence was protection. No recognition meant no distractions. He wasn't invited to speak about his journey. Wasn't asked for advice. Wasn't pulled into the trap of teaching before he'd fully learned. He could focus completely on doing rather than explaining. On building rather than broadcasting. Most people destroy their own success by announcing it too early, by spending more time talking about what they're building than actually building it. Marcus avoided that trap by staying silent. No viral moment meant no shortcuts. He couldn't rely on luck or timing or algorithm magic. He had to rely on fundamentals. On consistency. On doing the boring work that everyone knows they should do but almost no one actually does. Wake up early. Work hard. Eat right. Sleep well. Learn constantly. Repeat. Forever. No hacks. No secrets. Just the obvious things done consistently over time. Marcus learned something critical during those silent years. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like weather. Some days you feel motivated to conquer the world. Other days you feel motivated to stay in bed. If you only work on motivated days, you work inconsistently. And inconsistent work produces inconsistent results. Discipline never negotiates. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't ask if you're motivated. It just asks, did you do the thing you committed to doing? The years in silence weren't wasted. They were compounding. Every early morning added to the previous one. Every disciplined meal built on the last. Every book read expanded his understanding. Compound growth is invisible at first. You work for months and see almost nothing. Then suddenly, the curve bends. The progress becomes visible. But you have to survive the silent years to reach the visible ones. Marcus survived them. Not happily. Not easily. But completely. While others were celebrating small wins publicly, he was building massive capability privately. And when the silence finally broke, when people finally noticed what he'd built, they had no idea how long he'd been building it. They saw the overnight success. He knew it was a decade in the making. Marcus didn't chase trends. He'd watched too many people jump from opportunity to opportunity, always chasing the next hot thing. Cryptocurrency. NFTs, social media agencies. Dropshipping. Each trend promised easy money and delivered hard lessons to those who arrived late. Marcus learned that by the time you hear about a trend, you're already too late. The early winners have already won. The latecomers are the exit liquidity. He chased boring problems instead. Logistics. How do you move things from point A to point B more efficiently? Systems. How do you reduce errors and increase reliability? Efficiency. How do you do the same work with less waste? These weren't sexy questions. They wouldn't get attention at networking events. No one starts a conversation at a party by saying they're optimizing supply chain logistics. But these boring problems had massive value for anyone solving them. Things no one bragged about. Marcus studied industries where the work was unglamorous but essential. Warehousing. Distribution. Inventory management. The behind-the-scenes machinery that makes modern commerce possible. Everyone wants to be the face of a brand. No one wants to be the person who figured out how to reduce shipping times by 20%. But that person gets paid extremely well by people who understand value. Things that quietly print money. Marcus realized that the loudest businesses, the ones everyone talks about, the ones with the charismatic founders and viral marketing, are rarely the most profitable. The quiet businesses, the ones solving boring problems efficiently, the ones most people don't understand or care about, Those are the ones with amazing margins and zero competition. Because no one wants to do boring work. He started small. Found a local business with logistics problems. Offered to solve them for a percentage of the savings. Worked nights and weekends while keeping his day job. The business owner was skeptical but desperate enough to try. Marcus analyzed their shipping routes, their inventory turnover, their supplier relationships. Found inefficiencies everywhere. Implemented simple changes. Saved them $30,000 in the first quarter. That first client became a case study. Marcus documented everything, the problems, the solutions, the results. Used it to approach similar businesses. Offered the same arrangement, he'd optimize their operations, and they'd pay him based on the savings. It was a no-brainer for them. If he saved them nothing, they paid nothing. If he saved them money, everyone won. Risk-free for them. Revenue positive for him. The work was tedious. Spreadsheets. Data analysis. Process mapping. Conversations with warehouse managers and drivers and suppliers. Nothing Instagram-worthy. Nothing that would impress people at dinner parties. But the results were undeniable. Costs went down. Efficiency went up. Clients made more money. And Marcus took a percentage of those improvements. He reinvested everything. Better tools. Better software. Eventually, hiring help. He built systems to systematize the analysis. Templates for common problems. Processes that could scale. The boring work became a boring business, became a boring empire. And boring empires, Marcus learned, are the best kind. They don't attract competition. They don't attract attention. They just accumulate value quietly, year after year, while everyone else chases shiny objects. When Marcus made his first million, nothing changed. He didn't post about it. Didn't buy a sports car. Didn't move to a penthouse. He read about the $1 million mark in his accounting software late one Tuesday night, felt a brief moment of satisfaction, then went to bed. Alarm would go off at 5 a.m. regardless. Same routine. Wake up before sunrise. Workout. Cold shower. Healthy breakfast. Work. The $1 million didn't change the system because the system created the $1 million. Marcus understood cause and effect. Most people think money will change them. They think once they hit a certain number, they'll finally be disciplined, focused, happy. But it works the opposite way. You become disciplined first. Then the money follows. Same discipline. No celebrations. No luxury purchases. The money sat in accounts, working, growing, waiting to be deployed strategically. Marcus had learned that the difference between people who build wealth and people who just make money is simple. Wealthy people don't consume. They reinvest. Every dollar that could be spent on comfort was instead spent on capacity. Better systems. Better people. Better infrastructure. Same silence. He didn't tell friends. Didn't update LinkedIn. Didn't do interviews about his success. Silence had served him well for years. Why break it now? The moment you announce success, you invite judgment. People start having opinions about your money. Relatives appear with problems. Friends develop resentment. Marcus stayed quiet and stayed focused. Because money didn't create him. Habits did. The $1 million was just a lagging indicator of decisions made years earlier. Of mornings he didn't want to wake up but did. Of meals he wanted to skip but didn't. Of easy choices he refused and hard choices he embraced. The money was the result. The habits were the cause. And Marcus was smart enough to know which one mattered more. Most people worship results and ignore process. They want the money without the boring work. Want the body without the workouts? Want the business without the years of iteration? Want the outcome without the actions that create outcomes? Marcus had reversed that. He worshipped process and let results take care of themselves. And the results took care of themselves spectacularly. The first million is the hardest because you're building from zero. You have no leverage. No reputation. No resources except time and effort. But the first million teaches you how to make the second. And the second teaches you how to make the next 5. And those teach you how to make 10. Money compounds faster than most people realize, but only for people who don't spend it all celebrating that they made it. Marcus kept working. Not harder, he'd been working hard for years. But smarter. He hired people to do what he used to do. Built systems to handle what used to require his direct involvement. Started turning himself from a worker into an owner. The business ran more and more without him. Which meant he could start another one. And another. Each one boring. Each one profitable. Each one quiet. The money grew. But Marcus stayed the same. Same discipline. Same routine. Same person. Because he'd learned the most important lesson: success doesn't change you. It reveals you. The $1 million didn't make Marcus disciplined. It proved that he already was. By the time the world noticed Marcus Blackwell, he was already years ahead. Not louder. He still rarely spoke at conferences, still avoided the podcast circuit, still maintained the silence that had served him so well. Not flashier. He drove a nice car, but not an exotic one. Lived in a nice home, but not a mansion. Wore nice clothes, but nothing with obvious logos. Wealth whispers when you're truly wealthy. Only new money shouts. Just unshakable. That was the word people used when they described him. Unshakable focus. Unshakable discipline. Unshakable commitment to the boring fundamentals that compound into extraordinary results. In meetings, he was the calmest person in the room. Not because he was arrogant, but because he'd spent years training himself not to react emotionally to circumstances. He'd trained in silence. Trained in obscurity. And now that training showed. The businesses he'd built had grown beyond his initial expectations. The boring logistics optimization company had expanded to serve Fortune 500 clients. He'd started 3 more companies, each one solving unglamorous problems in different industries. Waste management. Facility maintenance. Administrative process automation. Industries where the leaders were complacent and the barriers to entry were knowledge, not capital. Marcus had the knowledge. And now he had the capital too. The billion came not from one big win but from many small wins compounded over time. 15 years of consistency. 15 years of discipline. 15 years of choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. The number itself didn't excite him. It was just a milestone, arbitrary and external. What excited him was what the number represented: proof that the system worked. Proof that discipline beats talent. Proof that you can choose your life instead of accepting what circumstances offer. Media started calling. Journalists wanted to write his story. Podcasters wanted interviews. Business schools wanted to study his methods. Marcus declined most of them. Not out of humility, he'd learned that false humility is just pride in disguise. But because attention didn't serve his goals. He had nothing to sell. No course. No book. No personal brand to monetize. He just wanted to keep building. And attention is a distraction from building. When he did agree to speak, usually at small private events for other business owners, he told them the truth they didn't want to hear. There's no secret. You already know what to do. You just don't want to do it consistently enough for long enough. You want results without the boring middle years. You want the billion without the decade of work no one sees. It doesn't work that way. It's never worked that way. Stop looking for shortcuts and start respecting the process. People were disappointed. They wanted tactics, strategies, frameworks, something they could implement by next quarter. Marcus gave them philosophy instead. Because tactics change. Markets change. Technologies change. But principles are permanent. Discipline. Consistency. Delayed gratification. Long-term thinking. These worked in ancient Rome and they work now and they'll work in 100 years. Master the principles and the tactics will reveal themselves. The billion changed his options but not his character. He could buy anything, go anywhere, do anything. But he chose to keep doing what he'd always done. Wake up early. Work hard. Stay disciplined. Keep building. Because the work wasn't a means to an end. The work was the point. Marcus had discovered what few people ever discover: true wealth isn't having unlimited options. True wealth is choosing what you love and doing it forever. And Marcus loved the building process itself. The money was just a convenient byproduct. When asked how he did it, Marcus said something that confused most people and enlightened a few. I didn't wait to feel ready. I trained until I was inevitable. The interviewer paused, pen hovering over paper, waiting for Marcus to elaborate. He didn't. That was the whole answer. Most people wait for the perfect moment. The perfect idea. The perfect circumstances. The perfect feeling of confidence that never comes because confidence is a result of action, not a prerequisite for it. Marcus had spent years feeling completely unready, unqualified, uncertain. But he'd acted anyway. And action created capability. Capability created confidence. Confidence created more action. The cycle reinforced itself. Training until inevitable means doing the work for so long, so consistently, that success becomes a statistical certainty. Not because you're lucky. Not because you're special. But because you've done the work that inevitably produces results. Plant 10,000 seeds and some will grow. Make 10,000 sales calls and some will close. Train for 10,000 hours and you'll become a master. The numbers don't lie. Volume overcomes doubt. Marcus understood what most people miss: the universe doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care if you're ready or not ready. It doesn't care if you're confident or terrified. It only responds to action. To work. To consistency. Emotional readiness is a luxury for people who can afford to wait. Marcus couldn't afford to wait. Not because he was desperate. But because he'd already wasted a decade waiting. He wasn't going to waste another day. The message wasn't inspirational in the traditional sense. It wasn't warm. It wasn't comforting. It was cold truth delivered plainly. You don't need to feel ready. You need to start. You don't need to feel motivated. You need to be disciplined. You don't need to see the entire path. You just need to take the next step. Then the next. Then the next. For years. Without stopping. Without celebrating too early. Without quitting when it's hard. That message didn't go viral. It wasn't designed to. Viral messages are designed to make people feel good immediately. Marcus's message made people uncomfortable. It removed excuses. It placed responsibility squarely on the individual. It said your circumstances don't matter as much as your choices. Your feelings don't matter as much as your actions. Your potential doesn't matter as much as your consistency. A few people heard it and changed. They stopped waiting for tomorrow. Stopped waiting to feel ready. Started training until inevitable. Years later, some of them would reach out to Marcus, thank him for the uncomfortable truth. They'd tell him about the businesses they'd built, the lives they'd transformed, the potential they'd finally actualized. Marcus would be pleased but not surprised. The system works. It's always worked. You just have to work the system. Most people didn't hear it. They heard the words but didn't receive the message. They went back to their comfortable lives, still waiting for tomorrow, still hoping circumstances would change, still believing that success would somehow happen without the years of boring, disciplined, unglamorous work. And that was fine. The message wasn't for everyone. It was for the few who were tired of waiting and ready to start training. Marcus continued building. Not because he needed more money. Not because he needed more validation. But because building was who he'd become. The billion was just a number. The real victory was the person he'd turned himself into, disciplined, focused, unshakable. That person would keep succeeding regardless of circumstances. Because success isn't about what you achieve. It's about who you become in the process of achieving. And Marcus Blackwell had become inevitable.
If your life feels easy, be careful. Easy paths rarely lead to extraordinary places. Choose discomfort now, or regret later. If this story challenged you, good. This channel is not for comfort. It's for builders. Subscribe for stories of discipline, wealth, and legacy. Like the video so this message reaches the right mind. And comment below. I choose discipline. Your future is listening.